Rather than squatting to deliver the baby and returning to work, however, the modern woman would take in a matinee and an early dinner and then check into the hospital for the night. The next morning, she would find the product of her doctor's labor, her baby, at her side. Despite its popularity among well-to-do women, DeLee's work was not uniformly popular with the obstetrical community. The prevailing logic for obstetrical powerhouses like J. Whitridge Williams of Johns Hopkins was watchful expectancy, the long-standing principle that those attending births ought only to intervene if necessary. Though in part Williams may have been reflecting an ideological view that childbirth existed outside the industrial logics of the day, his objection also squarely reflected the chaotic nature of obstetrics at the time. Placing too many techniques into the hands of undertrained, inexperienced practitioners, who were the far more frequent attendees at childbirths in the United States in this period, was simply bad practice. For DeLee's process to supplant natural childbirth and the watchful expectancy principle, the obstetrics community would require a massive upskilling, followed by the thorough and complete dissemination of DeLee's methods. Williams' concerns, though not necessarily solely addressed to DeLee, certainly found a target in his work. Though DeLee worked energetically to disseminate his procedure, making an enormous set of teaching films between the late 1920s and his death in 1942, it is doubtful that a great many practitioners could have picked it up, both because of the attendant difficulties of learning by film and the sheer complexity of DeLee's procedures. For all of its intent to rationalize and streamline childbirth, DeLee's hallmark prophylactic forceps procedure was exceedingly complicated, requiring the careful administration of at least 4 drugs at varying times over the course of the procedure, as well as an obligatory episiotomy incision, the mastery of implements like forceps and suction catheters, a variety of maneuvers and manual techniques, the existence of acute and learned observational skills, the proper initial care of the baby, the proper inspection of the placenta, and finally, the careful sewing up of the episiotomy incision, which promised to return to the perfect health, to virginal conditions, he rather disturbingly specified. That was his trademark guarantee. Though DeLee's filmic oeuvre did not successfully crack the market on medical distance learning, his films wonderfully manifest the extent to which the rationalization of process took hold in medicine. There are a few examples of the outcomes or products of the procedure shown on film. On occasion, a smiling new mother appears at the film's end, and in one especially memorable instance, 4 Cessones, children, born by his variant of the cesarean section, are paraded out and lauded as better physically and mentally than those delivered from below. But by and large in these films, it is process that takes center stage, its own qualities and features themselves the guarantor that this was birth done right. DeLee's fascination with film technology, which saw him at one point touring Hollywood sets to inspect their big equipment and cross-examine cameramen, highlights its importance to him as a kind of obstetric tool. Film technology was well suited to the task, not because it had anything to do with practical obstetrics, but because it allowed for the more complete rationalizing of process. DeLee's films required multiple actors. DeLee had required, he said, 15 women to make his cesarean film. High-quality lights and cameras, a camera person, scripts, and rehearsals. And when sound came into common use, he added a studio for the creation of sound effects and the recording of voiceovers. The right birth process, it seemed, required not just a flurry of activity in real life, but the embrace of a cinematic universe that alone enabled the control over process that could produce DeLee's desired result, a mother's complete return to health.